as you can tell, what we're here for is the title of the talk, how to test, make contract tests with Newman, basically turning your OpenAPI and Swagger docs into tests that you can run with Newman, the Postman CLI. So before we get into this whole thing, a little bit about myself. My name is Paul Cruse, as previously mentioned. I'm an engineering lead at Syngenta. I don't want to go too much into my backstory, and I'm bored you guys to tears. So if you want to find more information, you can find me on LinkedIn. If you want to shoot me a message as well, I do respond, believe it or not, so in a timely manner. So that's a good place to get connected. And though I don't find myself to be that interesting, I think the company I work for kind of is. The company is called Syngenta. We are in the agriculture space and probably the largest company in this space. We did about $23 billion revenue last year, about 50,000 employees. We're headquartered out of Basel, Switzerland. And that's all cool and it's fun and dandy, but I think the really cool thing about the company is our goal. Our goal is to feed the world, right? It's really straightforward. We want to help farmers and growers get the most out of their yields every growing season, using technology, using science to basically feed the world. And as the world grows in population, we need to make sure that everybody eats. So this is one of our really big endeavors as a company, and almost everything we do is tailored towards this one goal. And so though my company is huge, and the company I work for, is huge, the team I work with is actually much smaller. So we are Syngenta Digital. We're a smaller subset of the company, our own little department. And we have about 200 developers, right? We have primary locations in Chicago, in the USA, in Pune, India, and Belo Horizonte, Brazil. And no, we are hiring from my Chicago office. So if you're interested in working for a company that wants to, feed the world, once again, find me on LinkedIn. And as the engineering arm of the company, with 3 different locations and different things, we basically work as like internal consultants, right? All the different business units come to us and have us build things for their needs. But beyond doing that for the outside business units, we do have our own set of products. And those products are called CropWise. So CropWise is basically Google Apps for farmers. And we have a bunch of different apps that feed a bunch of different needs, right? So whether you need to pick the right seed of corn or soybean, we have the Seed Selector app. If you want to figure out what kind of pesticide or fungicide you want to use, we have the Protector app. And if you want to learn more about how to grow sustainably so you can keep growing more in the future, we have an app for that too. And our apps are doing pretty well in the market. We actually have probably the largest digital footprint of any agriculture company probably in the world. And we don't judge our apps, by users or even traffic. To be honest, we judge our apps based on the number of fields we cover with our apps, basically the number of acres we cover. And so collectively, our apps cover over 120 million hectares. Hectares are basically 2.5 acres. So we cover a lot of stuff, right? And that's really cool. And though it's cool to have all this being built, it's kind of hard to actually build it. As you could probably imagine, as I've said previously, we have 3 different teams in 3 different locations, right? 3 different time zones, 3 different primary languages even. So it can get kind of rough, right? And so we can kind of express that difficulty in a bit of an equation. And that equation for our team is basically, n teams times n products times n time zones equals hard to share resources, right? And so I had to get a Baby Yoda gif in there somehow. As you can probably imagine, for my company with our teams, it's hard for us to always write resources and services that, don't step on people's toes. Like, how do I know what I'm writing hasn't already been written, right? And so one way we've done this is, you could probably imagine, is we write APIs. Almost everything we do at Syngenta is an API. And we think of it as almost our bare bones requirement for any application that we're going to build is how can we build an API out of this? And then furthermore, how can we find other APIs that may do some of the work we need to get done with this particular project? And so having these APIs is our solution, right, for this current thing. But as you know, new problems erupt. And so our new problem is, well, how do we use each other's team's APIs, right? If I write an API, how does the team in Brazil use it? How does the team in Brazil use the Pune team, India's API, and et cetera? It gets kind of hard. And so as you can probably tell from the topic of this talk, our solution is documentation, right? So one of our other requirements is, hey, if you're going to write an API, which we are going to do, you have to document it, whether that's with, Swagger doc or with OpenAPI, we don't really care, but we need to have some kind of documentation that we can point to so that way other teams can figure out how to use your resources, right? And as you can probably imagine, right, this poses yet another problem, a new problem. And this new problem basically is, how do we know our documentation does what we think it does, right? We say this in the documentation, but how do we know it's not a mistranslation, right? Where we're thinking is saying Hakuna Matata, but it's really saying hungry potato or what have you. So the idea here is that we need to have accuracy with our API documentation. As you could probably imagine, I'm sure all of you have experienced this who are engineers. You may experience some bad documentation where the API or service doesn't do what it says it does, right? And I think that's almost worse, right? I think almost bad documentation is worse than having no documentation. So in order to kind of fix this problem, right, in order to fix this issue, we created our own little package, our own little solution. And that solution is called the PDT, or the Postman Documentation Tester, right? We try to use small package names since our org name is already large, right? CenterDigital/PDT. And so this package is basically meant to do just that, right? What it's going to do, it's going to take your documentation on your OpenAPI file, right? And it's going to take your Postman collection and it's going to combine the two and make tests based on your documentation, right? And then you can run these tests in Newman to basically verify that during your build process, that what you've said is built, what you said is there, really is there. And so this kind of guarantees that your documentation is at least as accurate as it possibly can be, right? Now, Newman has a lot of other cool tests you can write, and I think you guys should really explore more, but this is what we consider the bare minimum for our projects. And for us, having some tests is better than having than no tests, right? So at least it gives us something. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to demo this, right? And I'm going to do what everyone hates to do as far as engineering goes, live demo. So hopefully this goes well, and hopefully we don't have any issues. So we'll go ahead and jump right into it, all right? So hopefully you guys can still see my blank, wonderful screen. I'm going to scroll over. Perfect. Here is an application that I wrote just for this particular demo, right? It's an AWS Lambda API. That's not important. What's important is what's on the screen is the OpenAPI file. Right? For those of you not familiar with OpenAPI, it's basically a semantic way of writing out documentation. There's plenty of tutorials, plenty of YouTube stuff out there, so I'm not going to go too deep into it. But as you can tell, we have our paths, right, that tell us what path it is, and then tells us the post method types that we have, whether it's post or it's a get, a patch, what have you, right? And then, of course, down here, we have the different models that we're able to determine, right? So we can say, hey, this should respond in a demo response, and a demo response is a combination of this model with these required fields, right? So we should have an ID and we should have a demo key, basically a string and a boolean, right? Pretty simple.
Paul, sorry to interrupt you. Would you mind just zooming in a tiny bit? It's a little bit tough to read through Hopin.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's great. Now, yeah.
Cool.
Thank you. Sorry to cut you off there.
No problem. Thank you guys. Thank you for letting me know. So this is effectively, really simple OpenAPI file, kind of contrived example, but also, pretty good. You have to have a valid OpenAPI file. There's plenty of validators out there. So if you need to make sure you have that. So we have our OpenAPI file, and it's valid. Then we have our collection, right? And so what I'm going to go over here to our Postman collection. This is the demo I want to show. This is a collection within Postman, right? And this collection basically coincides with this particular API. So if you look in right here, we have a few, 1, 2, 3, 4 different requests. Look at one of them, like create. And as you can see inside of our create, I'll zoom up a little bit bigger, we have a test already, right? And this isn't really a test. We're basically just applying an environmental variable. For those of you who don't know, you can take a response from your Postman collection and apply it to an environmental variable and use it later on. So if you look at any of our other requests, we see that same demo ID being used, that same demo ID being used here, et cetera, et cetera. So this is kind of the cool thing about all this is that we are able to quite easily, I don't know where everything went, oh, there it goes, quite easily still keep our tests and still use these tests to kind of like chain tests together. And this is great so far, right? So we have our collection, we have our OpenAPI documentation. Now let's actually combine the two and let's test it. Let's say, hey, does this documentation actually reflect accurately what our API is doing? So what I'm going to do is go over to my terminal. I'm going to make this a lot bigger so you guys can see that. All right, so we have a bunch of different ways that we are able to test our OpenAPI with the PDT. The first thing we're going to do, right, and the first thing we're able to do is test it locally. So what we're going to do real quick is we're going to test this all locally. So to do this, I'm going to first of all open up another tab. This one you don't have to see too much, but I'll tell you what I'm doing. I'll go ahead and zoom in just so you can tell a little bit. I'm going into that same repo. Postman Galaxy, yep. I'm just going to run npm start, just so it can run locally on my machine in the background. Now, I have that running locally in the background. That's cool. Now I need to actually test against it, right? This is for local development. So I'm going to go into that same repository. And now I'm going to start typing out the command I need. So npx, so that way I don't have to install it, which is great. /pdt. And what we're going to do here is we're going to pass in a flag called collection file. Now, this collection file needs to be an exported collection file from our collection. So I'm going to go back to my Postman collection. I'm going to hit this button right here, and I'm going to export it. I'm going to use the 2.1 version, recommended version. I'm going to rename it just to demo, because I don't want to have to type all that much out. And we can see that over here, it created that exported collection for us. Pretty straightforward. And I'm going to give it that file to use as my collection file. So I'm going to say, hey, demo, Postman collection. So that's the collection I want to use. And then I also want to use the doc path flag to tell it where is my document path. Where is the OpenAPI YAML? So this is located here. And so we'll go ahead and enter on this. And just like that, super quick, it validated some arguments, it read in our collection file, it mapped it to our collection, and it updated our collection. If we go back to that same collection, we can see that it added a bunch of tests in it. Now, we're not going to look at it in this view. This is kind of rough, so bear with me. We'll come back to look at what it's actually doing in a second. But in the meantime, we can now use Newman to test this, right? So make sure that my local environment's still running. I'm going to run Newman run, and we're going to pass it that same collection. And now we need to pass it in an environment, and we need to pass it the environment to tell it, hey, use this environment with this collection. So in order to do that, we have to go back to our Postman collection on Postman. We need to save and export one of these environmental variables, so environmental file, excuse me. So we're going to use a local one. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save and export. I'm just going to rename this to just a local and save myself some typing. Cool. And I'm going to say, hey, use my local Postman. And now we're going to go ahead and run this collection against this. And just like that, we have our tests that ran. They all turned out OK. So we have 100% passing. So as a local development process, this works great, right? I can tell, hey, this is amazing. This is great. I can post this up. I can move on with my day, move on to the next ticket. But let's kind of continue on with this, right? What if you want to test it in real time? What if you want to test it, while you're using a build process, right? You don't want to test it locally. I don't have to run this in the background while I run my builds, right? So I'm going to go ahead and close this guy out. We don't need him anymore. And now we're going to use a little bit different tactic. The same exact package also supports using the remote collection. So we actually can use and test against the remote collection that we have here. In order to do that, a little bit change of our commands. So we're going to do npx at Syngenta digital /pdt, and I'll go ahead and refresh so we can get the top of the screen. And now instead of passing it collection file, we're going to pass it collection ID, right? And all of these flags also have short versions, so you don't have to type all this out. So what we want to do is we want to get the collection ID for this collection. Now, there's a few ways of doing this online, but I'm going to do it the way that I do it pretty quickly, which is going back to another workspace for Postman. I'm just going to grab all of my collections. You have to have a, what do you call it, a Postman API key for this, which once again, you can find all these resources online. But I'm going to go ahead and do that. Get all of my collections. I'm going to find the Postman collection I'm looking for. There it is, the Postman Galaxy demo. That's the collection I'm looking for. And I need this UID, not the ID. We need the UID, right? So this is the important thing right here. So we take this UID. I'm going to go ahead and save this. And let's make sure that I don't have anything else queued up. I'll copy it. My collection ID, I'm going to go ahead and paste that in. And then I'm going to also now have to paste in the environment ID as well, right? So actually, no, I don't pass in the environment. I can just keep it the way it is. So all I have to do is pass in the doc path. I'm going to do a D because I don't feel like typing all that out again. Application, OpenAPI. And so now that I have this guy taken care of right now, I need to also then pass in my API key. So I need to give it an API key in order to do this. So I'm going to use the same API key I have over here. I have it stored as an environmental variable in my computer, so I don't have to expose it to you guys. So we'll call it Postman API key. And now we get a few more additional flags that we can pass it. So what we're basically saying is, hey, PDT, I don't want to have to export my collection. I want to give you an ID. You go find it and you test it against this OpenAPI YAML. And here, use this API key to do that. To make matters better, excuse me, I can actually do what's called a push. So what happens with the push flag is I'll actually push the updated collection with the new tests to the remote collection currently on Postman. So we'll take a look at that in a second. And I'll pass it one more flag, which is cleanup. That means, hey, clean up any artifacts you've made. I don't want any, straggling files from your build process. So we'll go ahead and do that. We'll enter this guy. So we have our validating arguments. We now pulled our collection instead of reading the file. And the same thing kind of happens, right? We've mapped it, we pushed it back up, and we cleaned it up. And the cool thing is, if we go back to our actual working collection, let's go back to Postman Galaxy. If we look at the tests, hopefully it's there. As you can tell, all of these tests have been added for us, and it even kept the original tests we had there before, right? So you're able to write your own tests and then add these as extra tests on top of that, which is kind of nice. So this stays the same, and then we have basically 3 more tests based on the HTTP code that we're returning. So in this context, what we're saying is, hey, if I get a 200, or rather, if I don't get a 200, don't run this test. If I get a 200, test this schema, and then we're using the tiny4 validator to do this, right? We're saying, hey, let's go ahead and run this test for me. And make sure it all works. And then the same thing is, if for some reason we turn back a 400, maybe you're testing that. You want to test the schema to make sure your 400 response is appropriate. And same thing with your 401. The other thing we notice right here is this test. We're basically saying, hey, this endpoint should return one of these 3 endpoints, right? Or one of these 3 codes, excuse me, because those are the 3 codes that we have listed in our OpenAPI YAML, right? So if we go up, we only have 3 codes, 201, 400, and 401. So we should expect one of these 3 codes, right? No 500s, right? And then we do the same thing with the read. As you can tell, read is here, update is here the same way, and so is delete, right? Pretty cool. And we can tell that if we go ahead and run this just from our Postman, it's going to run. And if we go through our test results, we see that all of our tests have passed. That's cool. But once again, we're meant to do this automated way, right? Automated way. So let's go back to our terminal, and let's use Newman to do this again. So now we're going to say Newman run. Now, Newman run requires us to actually pass in the full URL. I don't believe they support just the ID. And if they do, that's new to me. I would love to see that. But they do have the whole URL. We have to pass it. So I'm not going to lie. I have prepared for this talk. So I do have some notes. And I'll just copy and paste it in so I don't have to type it all out. But as you can tell right here, we are saying, hey, here's our full collection ID with the API key. And then we also need to get our environment the same way. So basically the same example, right? We're going to go back to Postman. We're going to look for our environments. I'm going to send it off. And I want the Postman Galaxy demo. And we're going to take this UID is what we need. Now, once again, I have prepared for this. I'm not going to type out the full URL because I have it already. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this and paste it in. And now hit enter. And just like that, all of our tests pass. Now, this is still a lot better, right? I can test my remote collection. This is great. This is awesome. But if you're like me, all these extra steps of having to get my collection and getting my environment is a lot to ask of all of my developers across the world, and especially a lot to explain across multiple time zones. So we made this a little bit quality of life changes that we can pass with this. And so in order to do this, we can pass in the names of our workspaces and collection in order to test them. So we'll do the same exact thing, npx Syngenta /PDT, our workspace name. Once again, we do have shorter flags for all these. It's Postman Galaxy. Let me make sure that's right. Workspace name, team, Postman Galaxy. Yep, there it is, that Postman Galaxy. We then need to give it a collection name. It's going to be the Postman Galaxy demo. And then we also need to give it an environment name. So Postman Galaxy demo and Postman Galaxy demo lowercase. Casing does matter. So that's why I have this as an example. Environment name, Postman Galaxy demo. And same rule applies. If you're going to use many strings or spaces, you got to have a full string of quotes. And then the rest of this is basically what we thought before, right? We're going to use our docpath.d So application OpenAPI, we need to pass it that API key. So let's use K, $Postman API key. And then I will also pass in the push because I want to update it, the cleanup because I want to clean it up. And now with this particular setup, because we're using the name, we have the ability to actually run Newman directly out of this command. So basically just run Newman for us. And so I'll say run Newman, which will basically say, hey, go ahead and run Newman after you finish doing all this extra work. So we have our workspace name, we have our collection name, we have environment name, we have the place of our OpenAPI YAML, and then we have our API key and say, go ahead, push it up, clean it up, and run Newman. So we'll go ahead and do this. Does all the things we want, which is great, and it ran Newman all in one place. Now, this is great so far, but how do we see it actually fail, right? Like if I want to see this actually fail, because half of the battle is knowing your tests are failing appropriately, right? So what I'm going to do is go over to this guy. I'm going to scroll all the way down. In this demo response, what we use for everything, I'm going to pass a new required field called fail. We, of course, don't have fail, so this is not going to work. This is going to fail as our part of our response. Call it fail. So type bowling, doesn't really matter. And so now we should see that this schema no longer matches what reality is, right? So now I'm going to go ahead and press up on the keyboard and just go ahead and run this again. And just like that, all that red means bad, right? We failed a bunch of our different schema tests. And this is great for us to kind of work through this and figure out why is this happening. If you're using this in a CCID platform, whether it be Circle CI like we use or Jenkins or something, you actually can pass a secondary flag called bail, which is the same flag that Newman has, which will basically kill the operation if Newman fails on any test. So go ahead and use it again, hit bail. And we only did one request. We canceled our entire rest of our requests because they all failed. We can see that we were using bail true. And so therefore, hey, this is a problem. We need to address this. So let's go ahead and put it back. Just make sure it all works again. We'll undo all these great things I did previously. Awesome. And then what I'm going to do right here is run it again with the bail command, make sure it all works. And there we go. So that's basically it. That is the entirety of our package. We use it both locally and we use it both in our pipelines. This is something that we are really, really passionate about, making our documentation works. So that's basically it. We have other ways that we use OpenAPI too, but way more than I can talk in 30 minutes. But if you guys have any questions about this, I guess we could open the floor up. I will stop sharing my screen and I will just show my face.
Paul, this was awesome. I'm consistently amazed by all the possibilities and things people end up doing. So really, really cool. I don't know if you got a chance to see some of the stuff in the chat throughout, but definitely a few questions. A lot of people saying this is exciting and pretty pumped to try it out. I think if we pop over to Slido, there's a few questions in there. Quick one would be, does this work with Swagger definitions?
Yes, it does. We support both Swagger and OpenAPI. So if you're still living in 2018, we'll support you. I'm messing with you. I'm sorry. I'm kidding.
Cool question from Jared. Does it recognize tests that the tool had been generated previously?
Yes, it does. So it won't overwrite anything as long as you don't edit any of them, right? I should have showed you that. But when we made our failed test, it actually overwrote the old test and then reloaded and then didn't duplicate them. So as long as you don't edit those tests, right, that we make for you, we will find it. Maybe one day we'll add in some machine learning to find things that are like things we made. But yeah, for right now it's pretty straightforward, one-to-one.
Cool. Here's a question that came up. Why do you need to reference a doc file? Is it not sufficient to just supply the OpenAPI spec to create tests, since doc and collection can be created from OpenAPI spec?
Do I need to pass the? Yes, you do. Maybe it's a limitation of how our package works, but if you want to contribute and add to it, I'll definitely take in that extra work, make a PR. But I'll definitely consider that in the future. But yeah, for right now, you do have to pass the YAML file. We do use our OpenAPI files to generate our collections. So we actually connected to our GitHub and Postman in the back end. But this is a way that we're able to test the exact file that we want to test. So if I'm a developer, I'm making a new endpoint or I'm editing the API or new version or something, this is kind of the workflow that we use. But I would love for contributions to the PDT. It is open source, so yeah, would love to see that.
Cool. Another question came in from Jared. How do we get this? I think if you go to npm and look for the package, I think we linked it in the chat. But is that the best way, Paul? Just
yeah, that's the best way. You can find it on npm. It's on version 1 right now. So yeah, version 1. I think 1.1. I think we updated the documentation.
Cool. Let's see. Maybe one more here. Let's see. Is it possible to run the PDT on remote collection, or does it absolutely need to be on an exported collection?
No, it's definitely on a remote collection. As you guys saw, the second example was just passing it an ID. The third example, you don't have to give it an ID. If you can give it the name and the collection and the environment, it will find it. Those workspace names need to be unique. And then obviously within the collection, or excuse me, within the workspace, all your collections have to be uniquely named. So, and same thing with the environments within the workspace. So for example, we have multiple workspaces for every team. Like let's say our protector has a workspace and they'll have an environment called prod. It will find that environment prod because it knows that it's part of that workspace. If you have multiple environments called prod within that workspace though, it might just find the first one. So just keep that in mind. Inside your workspace, things need to be uniquely named. Otherwise, it's gonna have a hard time finding it.
Cool. All right, well, I think that takes us right to about time. Like I said throughout, Paul, this was really, really cool. If folks want, Syngenta has a booth, so you can stop by, get some more info there. I'm sure they'd be happy to chat and give you some more info.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to head over there right now. So see you guys in a minute.
Cool. Thanks again, Nate.
All right, bye-bye.